Welcome back to the afternoon session. I hope everyone enjoyed lunch as much as I did. Perhaps we give a round of applause to show our gratitude. All right, we're very excited to begin this afternoon session with a presentation by Mayor Samuel Sutter. Many of you already know of him by reputation, if not in person. Back in 2012, Jay O'Hara and Ken Ward, two climate activists from Massachusetts, decided to engage in a civil disobedient action. They took a lobster boat, was named the Henry David Thoreau, or the H. David Thoreau, I believe, and they ended up blocking a coal delivery to the Brayton Power Point coal plant down here for a matter of hours. It was a courageous act, and they were arrested, as they knew they would be, and it went to trial. And Sam Sutter was the district attorney at Bristol County, who was prosecuting them. And frankly, nobody in the climate community knew how the trial was going to go down. But on the morning of the trial, there was much jubilation in the courtroom when it was announced that Sam Sutter, the district attorney, had seen fit to drop the conspiracy charges altogether and to lower their other charges just to civil infractions, and he also reduced the restitution penalty significantly. So in the eyes of many, he became a climate hero with this action. As if to prove this point wasn't enough, Sam then appeared on the stairs, the front steps of the district courthouse with Ken and Jay to show his support for their action. And he had a copy of the Rolling Stone magazine that had Bill McKibben's article in it, Terrifying New Math, that explains how we have to leave 80% of the coal, natural gas, and oil underground for any hope of having livable climate in the future. So we owe a debt of gratitude for Sam for bringing this to the public's attention in such a positive way. And shortly thereafter, he was recognized by the national news stations and media, national media outlets, and so on. So we're extremely grateful for the courage that he has shown, and to have him here this afternoon makes, I believe, a very powerful statement for the evolving climate movement. With that, Mayor Sutter.
Carl, thank you very much. I was starting to feel a little too buttoned down as I looked around, but I see that you've got a coat and tie on as well, so that makes me feel a little more relaxed. My advisors, when I was running for mayor, kept telling me I'm too buttoned down, but that's something I'm working on. I'd like to thank you all very much for coming to the conference and for staying to hear me speak. It's a true honor to be invited to speak with you. This is an issue that I, as you'll hear me say at least one more time, I care passionately about and want to do much more about. I want to thank the organizers of the conference for what they've done to put together a fantastic group of speakers. And a caveat for all of you, every one of those speakers, I'm sure, far more expert on the science of climate change than I am. But that's not really my message to you today. I'd also like to thank President Sprague, who really is a leader, perhaps even a pioneer on this issue. Just look what he's doing to the south of us with the solar panels. Bristol Community College is a model institution, and we're very fortunate. Such a wonderful addition to the fabric of the city of Fall River. And I should know because I live right around the corner from Bristol Community College. So let me start my remarks. I thought about this yesterday afternoon when I started thinking about what I was going to say. I'm wondering how many of you, if we could have a show of hands, think that 90 to 100 inches of snow over the span of 3 weeks, shattering all existing records, how many of you think that that has something to do with climate change? I thought so. Here's my second question. How many think that 2014, the hottest year on record, followed by the snowiest period within a 3-week span, could also be the result of climate change, a corollary question. So I think we all agree that the evidence of profound climate change from this non-scientist perspective is crystal clear. In President Obama's State of the Union address this past January, you probably all are aware of this, he said, quote, "No challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change." And he then pointed out that 14 of the 15 hottest years on record have taken place in the first 15 years of this century. But it's clear that climate change is not only going to be a challenge for our children and grandchildren to deal with, it is adversely affecting us right now. Once-in-a-lifetime storms are becoming annual occurrences. 2012, Sandy; 2013, Nemo; Juno, just in the last 3 years here in the Northeast. But despite this overwhelming evidence, and here's where the politician comes in, there's still a large and influential contingent that denies the reality of climate change. I know because, for reasons of curiosity and just seeing what the other voices are saying, I tune into Fox. I have this nightly routine, and when I get home, I will, after dinner, eventually find my way over to the sofa and do the circuit between CNN, I've got DirecTV, so 202, 356, 360, back and forth. And it amazes me when I watch Fox, smart people pointing to situations like the fact that we've got a 3-degree, or we did at least in the morning, temperature. That means there's no climate change. That just, I mean, we're not talking about, we're talking about people who are bright and educated enough to be speaking to a million viewers or more on, and yet they're taking this discrete example and saying, well, that's evidence that there's no climate change, and they're laughing about it. That is amazing to me. For me, as a fervent advocate for responsible carbon practices, and for all of you, the activists, scientists, and students who are committed to creating a sustainable climate, this is our challenge politically. We must prove that we're correct and that this truly is one of the 2 or 3 most important issues of our times, and then we must make the changes necessary to fix the damage that has been done. It's a matter of debate, I think, as to what the most critical issues are. Certainly you'd have to put the terrorism of the Islamic State in that mix, and the possibility that they or some other dangerous country or individual, group of individuals, could get a hold of a small nuclear weapon. But climate change is right up there, in my opinion, with those 2 sobering realities. We all have a part to play. As mayor of the city of Fall River, it's my goal to make Fall River a symbol of sustainability, to serve as a model for cities across New England and beyond, far away on the plains of the American West and all the way to the plains of Africa. It's the job of scientists and educators here today to show the potential for repairing our soil through eco-restoration. And it's the job of activists and students here to serve as the voice that says that climate change is in fact real and must be dealt with now. I thought that perhaps what you wanted to hear from me more than anything was how I got into the eye of this storm concerning climate change and what needs to be done about it. So once again, I always enjoy telling the story. Here goes. I was sitting in some office, and I really can't remember which one. I don't think it was a dentist's office, but it was something like that. And there was Rolling Stone magazine, and June of 2013, with Bill McKibben's article, which drew largely on the longer article that you referred to And he called this, and this was about the march in New York City that was coming and has since passed in September of 2014. So this was June 2014 was this article that Bill McKibben called a call to arms about what was going to take place in New York on the third weekend of September in 2014. And I had been a passionate environmentalist, but too passive a one. And I started to read this article, and I found the first two or three paragraphs, truly inspiring, but more than inspiring, motivating. Because what he was saying was, it's incumbent upon you, if you care about this, to try to get to New York that weekend to make a statement. And I certainly thought that took place when 300 to 400,000 people were marching along Central Park, through the canyons of New York City, as someone said. So I read the article, I was moved by it, and I made a statement to myself, and I think my wife, that I was going, and that I hoped that our kids would join us. And in fact, one did. My daughter, she didn't have much choice. She's only 11. But my sons should have been there. I think that they were there in spirit, though. But so I read the article. And then about a couple months later, late August, early September, I got a phone call, a routine phone call from my press secretary, a man named Greg Milioti, another passionate environmentalist. And he said, essentially, it's time for you to zero in on this case that is coming up. I think the trial was September 8th, the day before the Democratic primary. It's time for you to zero in on this because this is a big deal. And I said back to him, well, why are you saying that? I mean, I haven't read anything about it ever since it happened. It happened in May of 2013. I haven't read anything about it. And he said, because you're technologically backward. And I'm on social media, Facebook, Twitter, various internet sites all the time, and I'm telling you that this case is big. There is a lot of attention being given to this and a lot of focus on this, and you need to zero in on it and decide what you're going to do. So I said, okay, I'll start thinking about it. And then maybe a couple of days after that, I got a phone call from the prosecutor on the case, Rob Kidd, and the first assistant, Tom Quinn, who's now the district attorney. And they said to me, and this is now maybe a week to 10 days before the trial, what are you going to do about the case? And I said, and I know exactly where I was at this point in time. I was in a parking lot near the courthouse in Fall River, and I said, hold on one second. And I went and got the article, which was traveling around in my car with me. And I said, listen to this. And I read them, the first two paragraphs of Bill McKibben's article in the June 2014 Rolling Stone. And I said, this is where I stand on this issue, that this is a crisis, that there's much more that needs to be done, that the sand is going through the hourglass in terms of our carbon emissions and the CO2 in the atmosphere. And so I'm not sure what I'm going to do on this case, but it's going to be consistent with my conscience and my point of view about this. So I think they were both startled by that. And then we convened after that a series of meetings at the office about what we were going to do. And the initial decision that we reached was maybe to allow me to figure out exactly what stand I wanted to make, that we were going to stall for time and ask the judge to report a certain aspect of this case to the appeals court with respect to one or two of the charges, one, I think, and whether there was a conflict between the federal statute and the state statute, whether it was duplicative, some legal issue. And we attempted to do that the Friday before the trial. And it felt like this, a thud before the judge. It had that kind of a reaction because it was too close to the trial and the judge wanted to move this case along. So that didn't go anywhere. And then once that took place, then I had to make a decision over that weekend. And I decided, a series of discussions with the prosecutor on the case, that the decision that was consonant, that was consistent with my conscience, as well as my duty to uphold the law, was to dismiss the criminal conspiracy because I didn't think that just from a kind of I mean, the connotation of a criminal conspiracy is so different from what Jay O'Hara and Ken Ward did that afternoon that I just wanted to remove that from the case. And then with the other three charges, I thought, well, I mean, technically they did break the law, but we're encouraged as district attorneys to save costs and time by reducing cases where there's no possibility or very little possibility of jail. There was a possibility the judge could have gotten, there was a potential jail sentence of 6 months on one count, 1 month on another. But district attorneys are encouraged, in order to free up more time and save money, to reduce certain cases to civil infractions, and I thought that's the perfect solution. Dismiss the criminal conspiracy, reduce the other charges to civil infractions, make sure that the town of Somerset is reimbursed for their costs in dealing with this, and that the state police get some of the money back for what they had to expend, and that will work out perfectly. And never did I think that suddenly I was going to be thrust into the eye of the climate change debate storm. What happened was, as I went to court that day, as I was walking into the building next to court where I had an office, I was walking along with, and I always forget this gentleman's name, but somebody who's a clergyman, very involved in the movement. And I happened to have McKibben's article underneath my arm, and we started chatting, and he was asking me where the courthouse was and where and I said, "Are you here for the trial?" "Yes." And I remember saying to him with kind of a wry smile, "I think you're going to be surprised by what happens today." Well, I, in fact, was the one that was surprised by how many people were there. I mean, I thought there might be 20, 25. The courtroom was packed. There were over 100 people there. Someone has said to me there were as many as 125 or more people there to watch this trial. And I actually recognized a couple of people because I happen to believe that Pilgrim Nuclear should be closed as soon as possible. And I had met a couple people along the way. Diane Truro and others, and I saw Diane, and now then I was starting to piece everything together, and the judge called the case at 9 o'clock, and I said, I think we're going to have a resolution of this, and within an hour or so we did, and I was pleased with the result, but I thought that was it. And I went downstairs to my first assistant's office, and then I watched this amazing scene play out outside the courthouse where first there were speeches given, but I couldn't really hear the words, and then there was singing and dancing that was taking place. I thought, wow, that's surprising, but that was my cue to go outside. There were only 4 or 5, this just shows the brand new social press universe that we live in. There were only 4 or 5 reporters there, 1 television camera, as I recall. And but I had said I would speak, and I went outside and I read a speech that lasted somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. And the next thing I knew, my entire professional world changed, because that speech went viral. And by the next day, the Twitter account at the Bristol County District Attorney's Office, according to Greg Milioti, the press secretary, was getting close to 1 million hits a day. For 5 or 6 days, this continued. And the next thing I knew, Boston Globe, New York Times, Huffington Post, Fox, and the reaction was predictable. I mean, on the right, pilloried, criticized, but in the middle and to the left, applauded. I mean, the positives outweighed the negatives 9-1, according to Greg Milioti and Ashley Bendixson, who were monitoring it. And yes, the Wall Street Journal did a piece, a negative piece, and Boston Herald saying I'd taken the law into my own hands. And Jeff Jacoby wrote a nasty piece for the Boston Globe where he compared me to, imagine this, Southern racist prosecutors dismissing cases against racists in the South in the early 1960s. I always wanted to respond to that one, but I was so angry that I decided discretion would be the better part of anger there. But there were wonderful pieces as well in the Huffington Post, on Democracy Now!, all in with Chris Hayes. And as I said, I found myself right in the middle of this, and I welcomed it. Since that day, have been invited to speak at Northeastern, MIT, Harvard Law, UMass Dartmouth, here at BCC, the Pioneer Conference at the Zeiterion in October, and it has been an exciting and inspirational development. And now this is, I think, part of my message. It moved me so much that when the Fall River mayor kept getting himself into hotter and hotter water through various situations, and the recall of the mayor movement started to pick up some serious steam, and I started thinking about how passionate I am about this issue and what opportunities there would be for me to continue my activism as district attorney. There wouldn't be many. But what I could do as the mayor of Fall River, there would be plentiful. I started thinking more and more seriously about running for mayor of Fall River, and I read a little bit about what Bernie Sanders, who may run for president, I hope he does. He would be a very important voice in that debate. Read what he did as mayor of Burlington, Vermont. Started reading about what other progressive mayors were doing. Just the other day, I learned from Kurt Spalding, the head of Environmental Protection Agency, about what Mayor Fitch is doing in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is just up the highway from where I grew up. I started thinking more and more seriously about running for mayor. Everything seemed to sort of fit together. So I made that decision in late October, and 2 months later, December 16th, I was elected, and now here I am, with all kinds of dreams and goals for what I think Fall River can do. But I would love to have your help. We are a fiscally strapped city with major intrinsic, inherent budgetary problems. So Rob Bentley-Esky, who's seated there in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th row, 2, 3, 4th row. Stand up and take a bow, Rob, if you would. He's going to be my point person for making Fall River more sustainable. I read about Quincy, for example, which signed a contract within the last year to put solar panels on top of many municipal buildings, saving the city literally millions of dollars every single year. But the problem is that we don't have all of the person power that we need at City Hall to move some of these interesting ideas forward. So Rob's there, and he's going to be waiting. If you want to give us your email addresses, we'll be in touch, and maybe we can figure out a synergy to take some of the energy in this room, some of the energy that Rob and I have to do this, and move some progressive ideas forward. In closing, let me say that my first 8 weeks in the mayor's office have had a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time dealing with the 4 storms And I'm hoping that there is no more major snow on the way. I'm trying to decide whether snowpocalypse or snowmageddon is the best way to put this, but I kind of like snowmageddon better. But anyone who's ever worked in city government will tell you that there's no busier time than when you get a blizzard with 12 to 24 inches. Because I've spent so much time dealing with these storms, I haven't yet been able to move forward on what I was just talking to you about, but I want to very much. It's my hope to have Fall River on the forefront of renewable energy use, just like it would benefit ranchers to graze their animals more strategically and improve their soil quality. It would benefit our city government to install more solar panels on the roofs of our municipal buildings. We would simultaneously save the city money while reducing our carbon footprint. Just like the eco-restoration practices that you heard about earlier today, it's a win-win. Better for business, better for Fall River, better for the planet. This is just one small example of what a city can do to improve sustainability, from protecting the heavily forested area just to our east, to cleaning up our brownfields and building renewable energy sources where there was once contamination, to making our government buildings more energy efficient, as Jack is doing here at BCC. There are many, many ways that Fall River can contribute. So as I said, I think my message, and perhaps it doesn't need to be said to you, and maybe it's just for my own purposes, but I'm proud of the fact that a passionate environmentalist like myself got the opportunity to get off the sidelines and get into the middle of the fray. I thank all of you for your activism to what is one of the greatest challenges, as I've said before, that our planet faces. Although I may be a neophyte, this is Rob's final line. I will read it because it's good. When it comes to the hard science, this is a cause that I care passionately about, and I'm glad everybody in this room shares my enthusiasm. So thank you all very much.
If we have another minute, the mayor's willing to answer a question.
Any question?
I know we're running a little bit behind it.
Great.
There's a question.
Yep.
The naysayers, the largest group of naysayers, I believe is the party, the Republican Party to which you belong.
No, I don't.
You don't?
No. I just turn on Fox News to see what they're saying. I'm a
Okay,
lifelong.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying, we've got to get now involved. They've got to start believing the science.
How do we get them to believe the science?
Involved in believing the science.
Can we get on a mic, please?
Want me to get back down here?
Yes, right here.
Okay, sure. Yep. Oh, okay. I've thought a little bit about that, and I think there are two courses of action that we can take. The first is, speaking as a former trial lawyer, see, my career was kind of funky. I went from tennis pro to trial lawyer to politician. But as a trial lawyer, as I think about this debate, I'm not sure that we've done the best job we can do. Those of us who believe ardently that this is taking place and believe just as ardently that we need to do something much more dramatic right away to stem it. I'm not sure we've done a good enough job in making the case simply and clearly. That's one of the first things you learn when you're trying cases, is that you're speaking to regular folks, not experts and activists like in this room, but just regular people, just like I am on the sofa watching O'Reilly or Hannity or whoever it is, and trying to make up their minds. And the more vividly and plainly we can make the case, I think the more we're going to be able to move, that needle. What percentage of Americans believe that climate change is taking place? What percentage of Americans believe that something fundamentally different needs to be done right away? The better we're able to make that case with simple, clear, irrefutable, and that's not a word I would ever use if I was speaking in front of a jury, just because the plainer the language, the better. I think that's one way. And I think something else that we can do is to try to make the case simply and clearly, but have the case as much as we can a part of the conversation. It starts to get lost, don't you think? I mean, when we're reading about beheadings and burnings and shootings of 21 individuals, it just, I mean, I can't remember. I mean, here we have had these historic storms within a 3-week period, and who that you can think of off the top of your head, because I'm watching regularly, has been saying, hey, there's a connection, like Bill McKibben would say. Because I remember from the article, he talked about the typhoon, he talked about Sandy, he might have even mentioned Juno in that article, drawing the connection between that and climate change. But yet, with all of this snow, I'm still waiting for somebody to say, hey, and because it could be explained very simply, I think. So I think those two things, make the case clearly and make it part of the conversation as much as we can.
Sam, could I just
Sure.
Throw you another lever? I agree with what you said, and from our perspective as Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, there's another angle, and that is, it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in global warming. What matters is that this beautiful, verdant piece of land looks a lot better to you than this barren, sandy soil with nothing alive on it. And it doesn't matter whether you're all the way on the right or all the way on the left, unless you're totally detached from planet Earth, you're going to want the green thing more than the barren thing. And if you do what you need to do to get to the green thing, you are acting to reverse global warming. I mean, whether you believe in it or not. So it's just another arrow in the quiver that we can start to figure out how to leverage to get people who are normally divided by the political spectrum undivided.
Good. Yes. Yes.
In Fall River, there's currently an area, the St. Vincent Farm area. I was just wondering whether I would maybe talk a little bit about that, what people could do to try and get that to be put into the...
Well, I'm going to be candid with you. Where is that? I've only been in office.
Over near the St. Vincent's home.
Oh, sure. Okay, fine. I know that's just around the corner here. Yeah, just up Robeson. And your question about it is?
People be made more aware of that in Fall River so that, people could do something to make sure that it doesn't get taken by developers
I haven't looked at that issue yet, but now that you brought it to my attention, I will, because I know that there's an organization in Fall River that's dedicated to that proposition. I don't know whether St. Vincent's Farm is... so you're talking about the plot of land right next to St. Vincent's. I know just where you mean now. Yeah. Yeah. Is that under attack at all? Oh, really? I'll look into that. I didn't know that. But now that you say it, I know. I mean, I drive by that anytime I go north on 24. I'm driving right by it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yes, sir.
There is at the college program, civic engagement, and in that program there's certainly you ask how members of your community could assist you in this,
Yes.
in this area. And students are asked to devote 10 hours in service to a particular program. If you would, you or your office would contact the college, I'm sure that they could get students who would be willing to serve as a community partner with the city to help in that program.
Well, that excites me very much. We were able to get some volunteers. I think we had 30 or so to help with shoveling out seniors and disabled during the storms at the district attorney's office. I'm very proud to tell all of you that I made it a job prerequisite for any lawyer, any manager, that they were going to have to volunteer in the communities every single year. And we, over the course of 8 years, we contributed 20,000 hours in mentoring and tutoring, coaching. So I'm a fervent believer in volunteerism, and I think that's a great idea. And Rob, you can put that on the list of 500 things that you have to.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask if
Okay, thank you.
we need to move our program
Okay,
along.
thank
but
you very much.
I'd like
Thanks, folks.
to I'd like to recommend that some of us can act as a conduit to get ideas from this
Great.
conference from Fall River to your office.
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
And there's the guy to do it.
Okay, Rob. Thanks so much for speaking with us.